My guest today is Stefan Rust. Stefan is the founder of Laguna Labs, which is a blockchain development house, and they have some really interesting products, projects, all sorts of things going on, which we'll learn about today. But welcome to the show, Stefan.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and excited to be talking to you, Andy. And yeah, thanks to the audience for listening.
All right, well, just before we get into Laguna Labs and some of your fascinating projects, Stefan, let's do what we do at the beginning of the show, which is I'll get you to please introduce yourself. Just love to hear a little bit about your story, your background, where you're from, what you've been doing up into getting involved with blockchain.
Yeah, no, thank you. I sort of view myself as a serial entrepreneur. I've been launching a number of businesses. I got really early on into the mobile industry, building mobile phone towers and physical networks. That then evolved into the sort of software side of it, joining Sun Microsystems and helping scale JVMs on mobile phones, so Java virtual machines, and that really brought about software on mobile phones. That was super exciting, building a whole developer ecosystem, which then in 2007, when the iPhone came out, I saw the need across all of technology industries to build the equivalent of an app store and have lots of apps on top of this new emergent platform. And all the other technology providers, as well as handset manufacturers and carriers, were all interested in growing developer ecosystems. And 2012, a developer asked me to pay them in Bitcoin. Didn't think much about it, but that sort of opened my eyes to what Bitcoin is or was. I just bought some in 2012. Didn't think much about it, to be honest, until 9 months later, I came across that developer again, and he asked to be paid. Can you pay me now in Bitcoin? Paid him, and it was instantaneous and no fees. And to me, that was like, wow, this is the new platform. This is the new payment rails. I can pay directly to somebody, no middleman, straight through a Skype conversation. And then I was hooked. I became the CEO of Bitcoin.com as a result out of that, from that journey on. And in 2020, decided that with governments printing so much money, that there needed to be a bigger cause. We needed to hold them and find out what the real source of inflation is. Is there inflation? How do we verify this versus just waiting for some big person to go up on stage and tell us it's 5.2% or it's 2.9%, whatever the number is. But how do we verify that? How do we get a better insight into how they calculate that, how they curate that, and how they disseminate that, if you will? And so there we launched Truflation.com, which is sort of one of the flagship products out of Laguna Labs.
Yes, it is, and I'm really fascinated to dig into Truflation with you today, then Stefan. But so I suppose just before we do that, maybe explain. You said that you the CEO at Bitcoin.com. So I'd love to hear just just a little. I know it's a bit of a sidetrack, but just I think it's it's really relevant as well. So love to understand. What is Bitcoin.com? Obviously, it's a website, but what's the kind of the company behind it, if there is one, and what are its goals? What were you doing there? And then please explain, I suppose, the origin story of Laguna Labs. Lots going on, but let's tie it all together.
Yeah, so I really believe in this peer-to-peer electronic cash system. What is that? How do we make that and bring that to life? What does that look like? And so to me, at Bitcoin.com, I mean, Roger Ver was the sort of founder of Bitcoin.com, and he and I had and shared that common belief. So we spent a lot of our time trying to make that a reality. How do we build that out? How do we get physical utility and build out payments for crypto and Bitcoin at the time?
Does that mean sorry to interrupt, does that mean you're a Bitcoin Cash guy, Stefan, or?
I definitely, well, I started off as a Bitcoin guy, and then I became a Bitcoin Cash guy. Definitely, I love Bitcoin Cash for the speed and the cheapness of which it could execute transactions. I mean, we brought transactions down to milliseconds. We had pre-consensus running on the Bitcoin Cash network. We had, we brought the fees down to, fractional, basically next to nothing. And I thought that was what was needed in order to take out friction in any payment rail. We scaled that. I mean, there are now 30 million wallets using the Bitcoin.com wallet. We have about 500,000 merchants worldwide supporting Bitcoin.com's solution, or Bitcoin Cash and other Bitcoin and Ethereum. So we did also, one of my mandates was to go broader than just Bitcoin Cash, but to also allow multi-currencies in our Bitcoin.com wallet, whereby we started with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash only. We then allowed for Ethereum to be supported on the wallet and worked with the Ethereum community to make that happen. Because I just realized what that opportunity represents, with EVMs being similar to JVMs and sort of that whole background and legacy. I just saw the EVM scale come in the future. And so how do we support that as well?
And do you still look? I don't want to turn this into a podcast about the relative merits of Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash, but where I guess the simple way to kind of sum it up is just to ask you, Stefan, is this still your view today? From a lot of people would say perhaps in the battle of a free market, Bitcoin is probably won in terms of market share and brand value, all that kind of stuff. It's not to say that Bitcoin Cash couldn't flip in Bitcoin at some point in the future. Anything is possible, but it doesn't look like that at the moment, does it?
So my view is very much multi-chain world, right? Every chain. Yes. I view we're in a laguna or an archipelago, if you will, and there are lots of islands in the laguna, and each island will have a special feature, functionality, or purpose, and have a different culture in that island. And each of these islands represent a layer 1, or maybe even a layer 2 or a layer 3 that sit on top of those islands. And they will then be connected with tunnels or bridges, right? So layer 0s could be the tunnels, and bridges, we have bridges today everywhere. And so that's my view. And I really want to live in a multi-chain world because I think usage is, users don't really care, whilst they still always ask, how does blockchain work and stuff like that. We get a lot of those questions, but I don't think they really care in essence. They want to know they can use their money, they can transfer it to somebody else, and they can have a great user experience in that interaction. Whether it's going from Ethereum onto Bitcoin Cash or from Bitcoin Cash to Bitcoin.com, how does that atomic swap in the background and underlying everything happen without the user even noticing? You receive the Bitcoin that you love. I have sent it to you in, the Truflation TFI token, for example, and we didn't notice anything, but I saw the price of what you're selling me in TFI, and you received it in BCH or BC, whatever coin you like.
Yeah, makes perfect sense to me, Stefan. Very much agree. So, all right, well, thank you for that. Let's, I really want to get to Truflation, because obviously inflation is one of the defining narratives of our time, believe it or not. And so it's funny, I know you guys have been working on this for 1 or 2 years, and you've got some funding from some interesting people. So we'll talk about that as well. It's just fascinating to see how all this has come together. But what is Laguna Labs then, Stefan? When did you found that?
So about 2020, last year. So early last year, I got together with 3 other individuals. One of them, or 2 of them, were from Bitcoin.com, actually. One more on the finance and fund management sort of side. Another one was on the marketing side. And then with Robin from crypto.com. And so we just both basically shared an idea. We wanted to build more, I suppose, commerce around the blockchain. What does that look like? How do we focus on that? And how do we need to build applications that are non-custodial? So it's still your keys, your coins, yet at the same time that it is providing users a great user experience, and we're using it for real world commerce. How do we do that? And we set out a company. We launched, at the time it was called Hydro Labs, and we converted that to Laguna Labs. And so now we have Laguna Labs, which is a development arm for all sort of projects that are focused around commerce. In order to measure commerce and to measure an economy, we felt we needed to have accurate metrics associated with that. And one of the best user experiences provided in crypto is the fact that you have a stable coin. Why? Because people were always nervous about volatility. So we looked at the stablecoin industry coupled with an indicator that calculates what CPI, or what is really consumer pricing index, how does that evolve, and how do we peg a stable coin to actually be stable to your basket of items that you need to spend on a day-to-day basis. That was sort of the genesis. So we wanted to build an inflation-pegged stable coin. And well, inflation just became so big.
Well, this is a fascinating idea. That so you call it nuon, right? And you describe it as the world's first flat coin. So I can understand what you mean by that. So I'm assuming that by flat coin you mean, rather than a stable coin as we normally understand it, which is just tied to, say, any pick a fiat currency, USD, NZD, whatever it is. But a flat coin is, well, you describe it. So it's how does that work in terms of being an inflation-proof stablecoin, Stefan?
So in essence, it stays flat to the basket of items or that are measured in CPI, and we want to protect people's purchasing power. And that's as simple as that, right? So when a government prints a lot of money, there is dilution of that money. And especially if they print money faster than the economy is growing, that means there is significant dilution in the market and associated with your US dollar paper bill that you own. So was there a way that we could then highlight these, in Truflation's case, 10 million items that we track price movement on a daily basis? So can we take those 10 million items, come up with an index on how they move, weight them, provide transparency on that weighting, make sure it's immutable so nobody can go and change that weighting, and then add that into a currency that allows us to trade against all of those, maintain the trading power of that currency against all those items that are in the bank. And that's really what we wanted to focus on.
And so what came first? Did the nuon flat coin come first, and through coming up with this idea of an inflation-proof stablecoin, you realized then that you needed some kind of decentralized censorship resistance inflation index. Is that how it happened?
It's a chicken and egg, really. I think it sort of started off with the stablecoin, to be honest, because I didn't really think that inflation metrics are for free. I didn't really think at the time that there was a value associated with just aggregating inflation. But we needed to look at how it's being calculated. How are they aggregating the numbers? Are those numbers accurate? What's the frequency at which they aggregate those numbers and present those numbers? What would an architecture be if we took a Web3 or a Web2 world, a developer approach to building such an infrastructure to aggregate all of this data? What would Web3 world look like if we brought this onto Web3? So we defined all of this in order to then be able to calculate and put that into a stable coin, or a flat coin, as we call it. Or, and to be honest, I don't want to steal that word, but, it was Balaji who came up with the term flat coin, and we are not the first. There are a couple of other projects out there building a flat coin as well. So we're excited to be working with those projects as well. But neither here nor there. It was really when the 1729.com inflation competition went out, was when we realized, actually, there's a product here to be had. We've done all the work. Rather than writing it up in a white paper and then submitting it, why don't we just go and build it? Because we need to build it anyway. And there is a product here. So we built a standalone Truflation.com product that allows us to then, and we demoed that in December. And that was sort of how Truflation came first ahead of the stablecoin that we originally went out to build.
Got it. And I'm glad you brought up Balaji and I think the website you're talking about used to be 1729, but I think that now redirects to Balaji's newest project, which of course is the network state. But if you go to, you can. I think that one of the maybe the only way to find it now is go to thenetworkstate.com/inflation, and I'm sure you're familiar with the quote or the hashtag Balaji was right, Stefan. Balaji, of course, famously one of the deeper thinkers, if not just on Twitter, certainly across blockchain. Certainly across our current landscape. But so. I'm looking at the website now, and I suppose this is Balaji writing maybe over a year ago, maybe this time last year, and he says inflation is a monetary phenomenon, a function of money printing, but it is also part of a social phenomenon, a function of mass psychology. If enough of the right people believe that inflation is going to happen, it will. As such, when inflation is happening, there is often a push to censor discussion of inflation itself under the grounds that discussing the problem actually causes it in the first place. And then, he talks about how this has happened in history, Argentina, Venezuela, just in the last decade. So again, I guess that's the context, and I'm just it's fascinating to see again, what Balaji was talking about here has exactly come to pass, Stefan. We've seen the US government try to redefine recession, for example, in recent weeks.
Yep. Yeah, no, and I think that's sort of, the main reason why we just felt we needed an alternative option to provide that censorship resistance and just hold institutions accountable, right? And modernize the way these institutions work, right? You can't just redefine something. Just be honest and blatant. It's like, look, there is technically we're in a recession. However, realistically, we still have 3% unemployment rate. We have all these other metrics that are speaking that it's not really a recession. So we believe we still need to do whatever we need to do as a result out of that. But our view was just really trying to change the narrative. And then you have this old bureaucratic, research institutes that are part of the deep state that are coming up with some old archaic model to identify how and what we should be calculating as recession, and trying to redefine that, and spending a lot of effort in trying to convince and coerce the people that this is the way we calculate recession. And the same with inflation, right? We have an institute that is established with good intent more than 100 years ago, and they built this framework to calculate inflation. But that framework has not changed. They still today, according to a Wall Street Journal article, have 477 people going to the grocery stores every month to calculate what the price of food items are based on a checklist. And by the way, they only calculate and track 80,000 items. So there are 477 people going on a monthly basis to grocery stores to track 80,000 items once a month. We track 10 million items with multiple price sources for each item on a daily basis, because we have much greater compute power at our available to us that we can then use, right? And so that's sort of really how we've sort of tried to take a fresh approach to it.
So talk us through a bit more then, Stefan, and kind of, how you went about building this index. So did it, tried to explain before, when Balaji was talking about this need for a decentralized inflation dashboard, I think it was Balaji and maybe Chainlink in partnership they set up this competition essentially, and they said, we're looking for a team to build a censorship-resistant inflation dashboard, and we'll fund the best team with $100,000, I think. So, pick up the story. How did you respond?
Yeah, so our response was, like I said, we responded by actually building it. We didn't wait to respond and submit our proposal in terms of how we would do it. We instead just went and said, let's build this. We've been studying this. We know how this works. This was like a red rag to the bull. Let's get this out there. And I set a landmark, which was C-Central in Miami in December last year. We'll have it done by then. I'm going to get a keynote there and I'm going to announce it. And I didn't want to even submit it. And that then sort of bubbled up into the awareness of Chainlink. And we then, ultimately we did sort of try and through social channels tell them that, look, it's up now and running. It's launched on Chainlink and would love to have a conversation. And that's how we then won the competition. We then did, however, for the first MVP, we did follow a lot of what the traditional CPI includes and calculates. So we had about 80,000 items for the MVP, and we sort of replicated what the BLS calculates. However, we just took it in real time, and we found a lot of credible different sources to pull that information from, and yeah, ultimately winning that competition.
And so, listeners, if you want to have a look at the Truflation dashboard, you can simply go to the website, which is truflation.com, and true is spelled T-R-U, just no E. Talk a bit, Stefan, about, I suppose, the kind of numbers that your dashboard throws up versus perhaps the statements that come out of I don't know, the Fed or the White House or whoever issues these directives on behalf of the US government.
So if you go, if on the app.truflation.com, which is really the actual dashboard, we're trying to build this out to really be an economic pulse of what is actually happening in the US economy. We just launched the UK economy, so you can see how inflation is looking in the UK, and hugely different in the UK. We're about 80% or 60% discrepancy between what we're reporting and what the ONS, which is the equivalent to the BLS in the US, is reporting. Those are the two institutions that are reporting and recording inflation on behalf of those governments or those economies. Anyway, and you can see in that dashboard the 11 subcategories that we track, and we're going to have another, I think in a couple of weeks, we're announcing up to 19 sub-indexes. We're going more and more granular as we add more detail, and then we want to be able to provide more indexes as sub-indexes under, let's say, the food and non-alcoholic beverages category, under the housing category, transport category. So you can then get more and more detail associated in that. But the way we look at that is inflation is calculated across these different items: housing, transportation, utilities, health, where we spend our funding. And we then weight each one of those. So we spend on average in the US, maybe 15.3% of our household income goes towards food and non-alcoholic beverages. And so how is that price evolving? And we've seen a rapid spike in that category, particularly over the last sort of couple of months compared to last year, right? And so last year there was a price of X, and it's now risen to, if I look versus, yesterday, what's it gone up? It's 10% more expensive this year than for that basket of goods, which is food at home and food away from home, which doesn't really tell you much. It's going to restaurants and buying at the grocery stores. And so we want to get more detail associated with that over time.
Yeah, and so I'm looking at the dashboard now, and it says that the Truflation year-on-year rate is 10.25%.
Yep.
At the moment, and that's I believe, and the official line coming out of the US government is about 9%, I think, at the moment. Is that right,
Yep.
Stefan?
Yep. So, and by the way, that 9% that they announced is 1 month old, right? So when they announced it, it's from the previous month, and we're waiting on the 10th. Usually, it's on the 10th of every month where they announce the new metric. So 10th of August, they'll be announcing what the inflation was like in June. And that's not including real estate, because real estate is up to a year old, right? So the lag of metric that we're receiving in that inflation number announced by the government is more than a year old for real estate. And housing, as you can see, is maybe 23% of the household expenditure.
Yeah, fascinating. And the UK Truflation rate is an astonishing 13.74%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we just announced this last week, and we got an amazing response from the community. I mean, the population were amazing. I mean, I was astonished at how much the community really reacted to our numbers. I thought, oh, we'll never believe this, but no, actually, the sentiment was very much, this is a much more accurate reflection of what is happening right now in the UK and what we're experiencing when we go to the gas tank. And I think the population are worried more about inflation than they are about recession. They don't really care ultimately, because unemployment rate's only 3%, they wouldn't really care about recession or whether we're in a recession or not. But they do care about the fact that they cannot buy that steak anymore. They cannot fill up their car with gas anymore. That is much more relevant and has a much greater impact than just whether we are in recession and what is the definition of a recession.
I think that is a very astute point, Stefan, and I very much relate to that, because if I think of it, and I'm sure this is, as you've identified, this is just how most people would rationally think. I have a reasonably stable, steady job, if you like. I have a stable, steady income, so I'm not necessarily worried. A recession might not hit me personally to the same extent, but man, the amount of money that my family needs to spend at the supermarket each week it's just gone up astronomically this year, and the same with petrol and things like that. So, but no surprise to see 10% in the US and 13% in the UK, and look, similar numbers all around the world. If we take the conversation a bit wider, and obviously you have opinions here, Stefan. You've obviously been a passionate a Bitcoiner, a Bitcoin casher. You've been in crypto a long time, so one of the thoughts, I suppose, with assets like Bitcoin was, that it would prove an inflation hedge, which hasn't necessarily been the case yet. But even look, Bitcoin's only 13 years old, and everything else much younger again. So there's a long way to go. But I guess I'm asking, what do people do? What do you think from a Bitcoiner's perspective is the answer here, and what do you think happens going forward?
So actually, I think Bitcoin has answered the inflation question really well. I mean, if you look, it's come from nowhere in the last 13 years to actually now being an element of Jerome Powell's statement that he says cryptocurrencies is impacting our policies that we're making. So in 13 years, from zero to actually having, Jerome Powell use cryptocurrencies in his statements, quite a phenomenal feat. And I think everybody that got involved really early on should be, super proud of where it's come. But we still have a long way to go, right? It's not over, right? I think there's a lot of different activities that need to be done to innovate in governance and innovate in terms of policies and financial participation around the world. But enough said there. But I do think Bitcoin is still ultimately, to answer your question, is an amazing hedge against inflation, because if you had bought it and just held on to it from 2010, 12, 13, 15, you still today would be significantly hedged against a 9% inflation on an annual basis. You are just holding that. And so to me, Bitcoin has become the true store of value. And what stablecoins has provided is the stability associated with that, and allowed for conversion between that high, maybe more volatile inflation protection to become a user, and given it a user experience that allows me to then make sure that I can protect myself against inflation, yet at the same time, I can take a proportion of that and use that for my day-to-day expenses. I want to see more and more landlords, utility companies, grocery stores accepting cryptocurrencies as a means of payment. And so that way we increase velocity on top of just the trading velocity that we have today.
Yep, it makes sense to me, Stefan. Then as we finish off this part of the podcast, then talk to me about, I suppose, your plans really at Laguna Labs. What are you guys working on? Any other products in the pipeline? How are you going to continue to develop Truflation? Just before we go to the break, what's on your mind? What are you working on?
Yeah, so we've been looking at sort of adding other markets, because that gets us more community, more visibility. So we're going to add a couple of markets, but I think where the community is asking us to go deeper into the data sets that we're aggregating. What does that mean? How can we get more precious metal pricing on chain? How can we get more commodities pricing on chain? And then how can we leverage these new data sets as a means to help with better and more accurately forecasting, or taking a look slightly into the future? So not just having real-time information, but how close can we get to real-time? Today, we're maybe a day or a week time lag, depending on the types of data that we're aggregating. Can we get up to the minute, accurate? What are the influences of transportation, right? We all know oil heavily influences the cost of transportation, but copper is another big instrument that influences transportation, because cars are heavily dependent on copper. The price of copper matters. So how do we make and build all of those factors into a lot of our calculations moving forward?
All right. Well, again, for people that want to keep track of the Truflation figures, the website, of course, is truflation.com, and all the information there is there if you want to track the Truflation inflation numbers, and of course if you want to get involved with the project as well. All right, let's go to a very quick break, and then we'll come back, we'll have some fun, we'll finish off, we'll run Stefan through the very famous Crypto Conversation hot take round. And boom, we are back. And I'm with Stefan Rust. Stefan is the founder of Laguna Labs, cutting-edge blockchain development house. One of their products is the fascinating Truflation.com, which we've been talking about today. But Stefan, I like to finish each podcast with a quick round of rapid-fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Of course.
All right, just going to run some questions at you, Stefan. So no right or wrong way to do this. Just want, honest answers, quick, snappy, hot take style. Question one would be interesting to see what you've got to say. Where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to a multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
Multi-chain, definitely, 100%.
All right, let's make it more interesting. Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash. What are we thinking today?
Oh wow, that's a difficult one. I think Bitcoin is a store of value. Bitcoin Cash has velocity. That's how I would put it.
I love it. All right. Well, what would you say, Stefan, is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
The separation of state and money.
Nice. I can tell you've been hanging out with Roger Ver, and I mean that in the best possible way. Um, Bill Gates famously said, Stefan, that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. So, 10 years in blockchain, as you'll be very well aware, is a very long time indeed. But, cast your mind forward, speculate away. Bitcoin Cash, Web3, Metaverse, anything you like. What does it look like in 10 years' time?
I think we'll have Web 2 type experiences on a Web 3 infrastructure, where the users are going to be in control of a lot more of their coins, their assets, their data, their identity. And I think you'll find that a lot of institutions will have moved those assets on chain. Purely because largely the velocity of innovation in crypto and the user experience improvements that have been provided, and the fact that the cost savings by embedding governance into smart contracts, we will have a lot more of the savings and less, and more efficiency as a result out of that.
I love it, the velocity of innovation. Speaking of which, William Gibson, sci-fi author, famously said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Stefan, with that in mind, can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
I mean, you see, I think virtual reality is definitely something that we're seeing is already happening. You buy an Oculus Rift, you can see where this is going. Ready Player One is here. It's in its very early stages. I think in the DNA, genetic splicing, we're seeing a lot of interesting activity there. A lot of innovation is going to come. So longevity, and I think we've seen what we can do. The cost basis has come down. It's now we need the innovation and the product build around that allows us to stay younger, stay healthier, faster, stronger, in a sort of a genetic way. AI to me, I think, is the scariest part of innovation. It's here today, and AI is something that very few people understand. And you need very smart people to really be able to understand it. How do we consumerize those? We're already seeing them helping us drive cars. You're seeing them help us with dictation and recognizing our voice in our homes. So it's coming, and it's going to come more and more. And those are sort of just a few innovations that are happening.
Absolutely. All right. Well, time to zoom out, time to get weird just for a second, Stefan. What do you see as the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
Yeah, I don't know what to answer. I mean, I see utopia. I mean, I'm a positive guy. I'm always super excited. I think this is the best time to be alive. And I think as people, we will come together and look out for the best in ourselves. I do not believe that, I think we have to come together as people and be proactive and engaging to achieve utopia. But I believe in utopia.
I love it. All right. We're almost done, Stefan, but let's make a wild prediction, I guess. What happens with inflation over the next 12 months or so?
I think it will start to wane in the public. It will not be as a hot topic as it is today. And as a result, inflation, we're already seeing a slight trend. I mean, it spikes a little bit, but it's already sort of beginning to come down. Governments are trying to tackle inflation and change the narrative away from inflation because, as you read out and pointed out in the blog post, that the more people talk about it, the more it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. But as a result, they're going to be looking for alternative sources of data to be able to help them calculate what inflation is. And inflation, by the way, is a good thing for economy. It's a sign of growth in economy as well. And let's make sure that GDP outgrows inflation, or only inflation is just a little bit ahead of GDP growth. And let's make sure we spend money in building infrastructure, innovation, creating new jobs to support the furtherment of those innovations versus just handouts and buying votes, etc.
Yeah, and again, that is a fantastic point, Stefan. You know, the whole point of an economy is, you know, we need buyers, we need sellers, we need producers, and, you know, we want society to keep on building things and making things, and people to go and be able to buy things. The problem comes when those prices just rise much faster than people's ability to pay for them, and that's when things go a bit wrong. But anyway, we reach pretty much the end of the show, Stefan, and the final question, of course, is what is your favorite science fiction book, film, TV show, or universe?
So Matrix. I mean, I love the Matrix. That was definitely really super captivating. You know, I was really fortunate to read Snow Crash. It's definitely a book that sort of impacted me as well. But definitely, I think, you know, Star Wars. I mean, we all love Star Wars. I think that put us into, as a kid, that was my favorite movie. You know, sort of I've always loved science fiction. Why? The new frontier. We all are looking for new frontiers because those represent significant opportunities and provide hope. And so I think, you know, Matrix was definitely the one that, if I were to highlight one movie that really stood out, that's one. Ready Player One was another good book too, by the way, and another. So many different science fiction activities, but
so many, and some classics there: The Matrix, Star Wars, Ready Player One, and Snow Crash. There you go. So some classics. I love it. Thank you, Stefan, for coming on the show. Nothing else to do, really, except hand the metaphorical microphone back to your good self. Please tell the people where they can find you on Twitter or wherever else you like to hang out on the internet, and where they should go if they want to learn more about what you guys are doing at Laguna Labs and Truflation.
Thank you. srust99 is my Twitter handle, so SRUST99. You can find me on there, and then basically, you know, app.truflation.com, check it out. And yeah, just DM me on Twitter. I'm pretty much there all the time, responsive, and try to engage with the community. Laguna is LAGU.NA, so lagu.na.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Stefan. All the best, and bye for now.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks a lot.
All right, there you go. There was Stefan Rust from Laguna Labs. And yeah, Truflation, fascinating. I do remember when Balaji was first talking about this idea of the need for a censorship-resistant, decentralized on-chain inflation index. And I did see, that at the time on 1729 he'd published, this call to action, this call to arms for people to respond. And then I guess I never saw the announcement of the winner, but yeah, lo and behold, it was Stefan and his team. So fascinating to see how that came together. Of course, and a year later, we've got runaway inflation. What a crazy old world it is. All right, we come to the end of today's show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the Crypto Conversation on whatever podcast app you're using. But that's today's episode. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin.